Hey everyone, this is Preaching in Politics. I'm Scott Clem. I wanted to start this page for a long time now where we talk about politics and religion, right? The two things that you should never talk about, the things that I seem to like the most, and we're going to talk about them all on the same page. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, I want to encourage you to do so. Also, if you like the video and the content, I'd encourage you to like and share the information. That would certainly be helpful to me as well. Today we're going to be talking about Roe v. Wade. Now, unless you've been living under a rock, you found out today that the Supreme Court has overturned Roe v. Wade. You know, the landmark decision that they enacted back in 1973, and they reversed themselves. Now, what does this mean for you and I? What happens next? And really, where do we go from here? And I want to talk about those things in this video because I found that there's a lot of confusion on just exactly what this court decision actually means. If you spend any amount of time watching the news and their bias and their spin, or you listen to politicians, whether on the right or the left, they're going to give you their bias and their spin. It has pro-lifers cheering and praising God, and it has the liberals and the progressive left wringing their hands and cursing the day that they were born. If you listen to the left, I mean, you would have thought that you killed someone's grandmother. They are absolutely having a meltdown right now because to them, being able to kill their own children is something that they cherished, apparently. And now that they can't do that, they feel like they've had something stolen from them. Now, what's all the fuss about? We're going to talk about why this is. I'm going to jump into some news headlines here and just describe very briefly what exactly does this decision mean. I like this article from Politico. I got several articles that we're going to go through, and you can check these out. In fact, what I'll do in the description box is I'll put links to these articles so you could check these out in your own time. This one's from Politico. The Supreme Court gives states green light to ban abortion, overturning Roe. You say, I thought that overturning Roe v. Wade just means that abortion is illegal everywhere. Well, if you thought that, you thought wrong, because that's not what this decision does. What happened in 1973 under Roe v. Wade is they took the authority to regulate or create these laws around abortion away from the states, and it put it in the wheelhouse of the federal government so that the federal government was the one making all of the decisions for everybody. And so this decision today reverses what the Supreme Court did in 1973. You'll notice a lot of these articles sound the same. Probably, well, let's face it. The media is the spokesman of the radical left. I mean, that's just how it works in America today. The Supreme Court on Friday revoked the constitutional right to an abortion that has been in place for half a century, overturning Roe v. Wade in a 5-4 vote, clearing the way for dozens of states to swiftly ban the procedure and throwing the country into uncharted political, legal, social, and medical territory. The bombshell decision is set to upend elections across the country as governors, attorneys general, and other state and local leaders gain new powers to determine when abortion will be permitted, if at all, and who should be prosecuted and potentially incarcerated when bans take effect. In other words, what this decision has done is it says, federal government, this isn't something that you get to regulate, and we're kicking it back to the states. That's all this decision does. And people are having an absolute meltdown. Why is that? Because people love power, in particular politicians in Washington, whether on the right or especially the left, and they want to be able to be busybodies and meddle in your life and tell you what you can and cannot do. That's just a fact of life. This one from the Wall Street Journal. Supreme Court overturns Roe v. Wade, eliminates constitutional right to an abortion. Let's time out for just a second because you hear this language a lot. A constitutional right to abortion. Nowhere in the federal Constitution does it say that women have a right to an abortion. Comb it over with a fine-tooth comb. You won't find that language anywhere. That is completely made up. That is something we call by fiat. In other words, in 1973, the radical court during that time by fiat said that women have a constitutional right to kill their own children. Now, is that a true constitutional right? Absolutely not. You won't find that in the Constitution. But again, the left-wing media doesn't care, and they're spitting out Democrat talking points, and that's what we find here. So the Supreme Court eliminated the constitutional right to an abortion, overruling the 1973 decision, leaving the question of abortion's legality to the states, as it should. First of all, it was never a constitutional right, and it is within the wheelhouse of the states to decide on issues like this, not the federal government. The court's decision upheld a law from Mississippi that bans abortion after 15 weeks of pregnancy, roughly 2 months earlier than what had been allowed under the Supreme Court precedent dating back to Roe. In doing so, the court's conservative majority said the Roe decision was egregiously wrong in recognizing a constitutional right to an abortion, an error the court perpetuated in the decades since. Notice the quote here. The Constitution makes no reference to abortion, and no such right is implicitly protected by any constitutional provision, Justice Samuel Alito wrote for the court. It's time to heed the Constitution and return the issue of abortion to the people's elected representatives. Amen. Here's another article here. In historic reversal, Supreme Court overturns Roe v. Wade, freeing states to outlaw abortion. It says here this 5-4 ruling marks the most significant curtailing of an established constitutional right in the court's history. Now, this is one of those things that I have found all throughout these news articles is the news media bias in saying, I mean, they're repeating the left's talking points. That this was a constitutional right. No, it wasn't a constitutional right. Not by a long shot, and the court is finally recognizing that it's not. It goes on and it says the opinion written by Justice Samuel A. Alito closely tracks a draft that was leaked by Politico in May. And of course, you remember this has kind of been a long time coming because we knew from about a month ago that the Supreme Court was going to do this, and thankfully they didn't correct themselves under the pressure of that leak campaign. Anyway, it goes on and it says, we hold that Roe and the 1992 Planned Parenthood versus Casey must be overruled, Alito wrote. The Constitution makes no reference to abortion, and no such right is implicitly protected by any constitutional provision, including the one on which the defenders of Roe and Casey now chiefly rely, the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment. One more here, just so you can see. Supreme Court overturns Roe v. Wade. States now can ban abortion. I like what this one says. You can see here highlighted, the Supreme Court on Friday stripped away women's constitutional protections for abortion. They never had a constitutional protection for abortion. It goes on and says, a fundamental and deeply personal change for Americans' lives as nearly a half century under Roe v. Wade. They make it sound like everybody was going and getting an abortion and now they can't anymore, and that's such a bad thing. Just absolutely ridiculous. The court's overturning of the landmark court ruling is likely to lead to abortion bans in roughly half the states. We'll talk about that. The ruling, unthinkable just a few years ago, was the culmination of decades of efforts by abortion opponents, made possible by the emboldened right side of the court, fortified by 3 appointees of former President Donald Trump. Both sides predicted the fight over abortion would continue in state capitals, in Washington, and at the ballot box. Justice Clarence Thomas, part of Friday's majority, urged colleagues to overturn other high court rulings protecting same-sex marriage, gay sex, and the use of contraceptives. You know, they put that in that article just as a firebomb. Well, which states are actually going to be putting this into effect? I guess the question really is what happens next now that the Supreme Court has acted? What does happen? Well, first of all, you need to know that there are several states, including the state of Wyoming, that put in effect something called a trigger law. In fact, just this last year, when the legislature was in session, they essentially said that if the Supreme Court rules this way, then this is what's going to happen. And in the state of Wyoming, abortion is now illegal, except under the case, I think, of a woman's life. If her life is in jeopardy, then an abortion is warranted during that time. And there are several states who have done things exactly like this. Of course, this says 18 states which immediately outlawed abortion, including Democrat-led Michigan and Wisconsin, as soon as Roe v. Wade was overturned, thanks to triggered laws set up in anticipation. And there are several states here, just kind of give you an idea here. Here's a good little screenshot. Trigger laws and historic statutes mean that abortion is already illegal in 18 states. In fact, it's going to be illegal in about half the states, and half the states it's going to be legal still. So places like New York and California, where they don't mind killing kids, you'll still be able to kill your children in those states. But you won't be able to do that in places like Wyoming, where we do have a trigger law that was enacted this last year. Essentially, the legislature, when they got together, a bill was written that says if the Supreme Court rules this way, then we are going to outlaw abortion, except in cases of a woman's health. And that's what happened in Wyoming. You can see here in Wisconsin and Michigan, you say, those are Democrat-controlled states. What are they doing? Well, here's the thing. They had laws already on the books decades ago, and they never got rid of those laws. So let me put it to you like this. In Wyoming, we still have on our books that marriage is between a man and a woman. You say, well, yeah, but like 5 years ago or so, the Supreme Court overturned that. That's exactly what happened. It did the same thing with Roe v. Wade. It took the decision of marriage out of the hands of the states, and it gave it to the federal government, and the federal government is then now deciding for all of the states and taking it away from your elected representatives, what constitutes marriage or not. But in the state of Wyoming, we still have on our books that marriage is between one man and one woman only. Now, if the Supreme Court would later on overturn the gay marriage, then what would happen? And kick it back to the states, then our laws that are already on the books would would go right back into effect. And this is the case for places like Wisconsin and Michigan and Arizona, West Virginia, Alabama. They already had laws on the books. They never changed those laws. They probably never, like in Wisconsin and Michigan, they probably never dreamed that Roe v. Wade would actually be overturned. And now those laws are going back into an effect, and it is causing the left to have an absolute meltdown. In fact, the governor of Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer, is trying to figure out a way to stop Michigan's law from going into effect, and she can't because she doesn't have the power to do it. Thank God for the separation of powers and for federalism. And so 18 states here, and many more to come, are going to outlaw in some way, shape, or form abortion. What else is going to happen next? Well, there's going to be riots in the street. There's going to be protests. And of course, that's what some of the headlines were about. Protests are up at Supreme Court after abortion case ruling. There's going to be riots in LA. There's going to be riots in New York. They're going to be all over the place. In fact, there's news on this. It's probably going to go on throughout the weekend. And they're going to put January 6th probably to shame. This is just... The hypocrisy is so rich when we see people out there destroying things, burning and looting private and public property. It's just absolutely astounding. Of course, we're not going to see the January 6th Commission start an investigation on the riots that happened today. No, sir. We won't see anything of that sort. Liz Cheney wouldn't have that because, of course, we all know that January 6th was the most horrible day in America ever. And, of course, that's not true. I'm being facetious. But what else is going on? What else is happening? Well, as you would expect, the politicians are out there spinning, and they're of course, the liberals. It's comical. It really is. They're having a complete meltdown. I mean, people from like Nancy Pelosi to Obama to Biden to even other world rulers, they're going absolutely nuts because they can't kill children anymore. Nancy Pelosi just makes me laugh because the woman is so senile and crazy. What is happening here? Emotional Pelosi slashes at Trump and Republicans over cruel Roe v. Wade decision. I was watching some of the press conference, and she comes out and she says, I would say good morning, but this is not a good morning. And then she goes on to talk about how women's health care is under attack and all of this stuff. And of course, the typical liberal spin that you would expect from all of this. Obama's doing the same thing. He says here, about this overturning Roe v. Wade, attacking the essential freedoms of millions. Yeah, the freedom to kill your own child. Where is that in the Constitution? Joe Biden gives chilling warning over Roe v. Wade decision and says women's lives are at risk. Right. No, the only lives that were at risk were the innocent babies inside of women's tummies. Those were the lives that were at risk, not these women. Here's another one. U.S. abortion decision. Horrific and appalling, world leaders say. I thought this one was just comical. You know what? What do world leaders have to do with our laws? Go back to your own country, make your own laws. But here you have some world leaders weighing in. World leaders and abortion advocates describe the ruling as horrific and appalling. Crowds rallied in protests in cities including London, Paris, Edinburgh, and Scotland. Horrific and appalling. No, the only thing that was horrific and appalling is that we allowed the systematic killing of children in the womb to go on for 50 years. Listen to this guy. One of the darkest days for women's rights in my lifetime, Scottish leader Nicola Sturgeon wrote on Twitter just minutes after the decision came down. The fact that people can't kill their children anymore is one of the darkest days in your lifetime. Well, then you, sir, have a really sad and twisted life. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau also called the news horrific, saying that no government, politician, or man should tell a woman what she can and cannot do with her body. In some sense, I agree with him. We shouldn't be telling people what they can do with their body. But a baby is not a woman's body. That is a baby's body. Completely different. There's other things going on as well. The right is also having a heyday with this. And of course, there's people celebrating all of what's going on, and rightly so. Pro-life people out there are celebrating what has happened. Mike Pence celebrates overturning Roe v. Wade by calling for a national ban on abortion. He's actually going one step further, essentially, and saying, listen, we should have a national ban on abortion, that it really is about the right to life, which is something that the Constitution of the United States guarantees, is the right to life. There's other states like Texas. I think it was the Attorney General there that was talking about an agency holiday because of the good news. And so there are other people that are celebrating. I also want to touch on one other thing here, and that is just some further court rulings that we could expect as a result of today's decision. Justice Thomas alluded to this. He's a headline here. Of course, they want to make him look as crazy and dumb and as a threat as they possibly can. Supreme Court should correct error on contraception and same-sex marriage. Now, they put it that way in the article because they want people to be afraid. Now, without any kind of context, this is going to make people just go absolutely nuts, which is exactly what is happening. They want people to be out there rioting in the streets because this is how they get what they want. The left throws temper tantrums and they try to bully their way into power, and this is what it is for them. What did Justice Clarence Thomas say? Well, he wrote a concurring opinion in Friday's ruling overturning Roe v. Wade, arguing the court should correct the error of rulings that protect same-sex marriage and contraception access. So what is this all about? It's the idea of federalism. What he is saying is who should decide on issues of same-sex marriage and who should decide on issues, for instance, of contraception. And this goes back to the whole idea that we have a constitution that gives enumerated powers. In other words, our Constitution says, federal government, here's the things that you can regulate, here's the things that you can make laws concerning, and that's it. The rest of society's problems and issues and all that goes to the states or it goes to individuals. In other words, the federal government isn't almighty. In fact, we have something very unique in that we have 50 sovereign states that make laws of their own. And the federal government only has so much jurisdiction, so much control on what it can and cannot wade into. And then the broad scope of things is given over to the states. And so the states can make those laws, like marriage, like on contraception, like on abortion. And what the Supreme Court is doing is saying, hey, wait a second. The federal government has no business defining what marriage is, because marriage is not one of the enumerated powers of the federal government in the Constitution. And if we respect and value the rule of law, then we should allow those things to go back to the states, and they should be overruled. We do not want a behemoth, almighty federal government with runaway power. And the court's responsibility is to make sure that the laws that are on the books abide by the Constitution. So they're doing a good thing here. So you say, well, what happens if a state does something I don't like? Well, there's a couple things you can do. This is why elections matter. This is where you can lobby and work at a local level to try to overturn or affect laws in your states. And believe me, it's a whole lot easier to do that in your state than it is in Washington, D.C., because chances are you've rubbed shoulders and you've shook hands with your lawmakers who are accountable to you. Those elections matter. But if you really don't like the state, then you can move to another state where the laws are more better for you. And so you have the option to move to different states. How about that, huh? That's the way that it should be in America. Just some final thoughts. First of all, this is certainly a step in the right direction, but it's not the end. There are other things that need to be done. So, final thoughts here as we shut this thing down. This certainly is a step in the right direction. Returning the authority back to the states is a good thing, but by no means is the fight over, and we need to realize that. This doesn't outlaw or ban abortion completely. Now in Wyoming, it pert near does, but in half the states, abortion is going to be legal, and this fight will continue unless, for instance, there is a national ban on abortion. Which leads me to my next thought. Your actions have consequences. If you're in one of those states where abortion is going to be legal for people, and you want to see that changed, well, then you have a say in who your elected leaders are. Who you vote for really does make a difference. You choosing not to vote makes a difference as well. And this is going to put a microscope on those smaller local elected races. But going more into the theological side of things, your actions have consequences with your decisions. If you live fast and loose, if you let your teenagers go out there and party and have sex and all that kind of stuff, and they end up pregnant, listen, those actions have consequences. Sex is a gift of God for marriage. It's a beautiful and it's a wonderful thing, and it's a true privilege, but it also comes with responsibility. And that responsibility is when two people are committed to each other in marriage before God and before witnesses, they are also saying we are taking on the responsibility of raising a family should God give us the opportunity to do so. And we need to start taking that responsibility seriously. Families matter. Fathers and mothers matter. This responsibility is paramount, because what this decision, Roe v. Wade, has done for many, many people is it's allowed them to engage in certain privileges without taking the responsibility. And now that has ended. The party is shut down in some sense. But this leads me to my next thing in this. We're not going to stop people from acting irresponsibly. There's going to be people that engage in sexual activity outside of marriage. So we know there's going to be people with unplanned pregnancies. We know there's going to be horrific things that people do, and people are going to end up with children. And this is where, as the church, we need to step up and show mercy to those people, to in particular to women who are scared, who have nowhere else to turn, who've made some bad decisions, but now they're faced with some real challenges. And one of those challenges is bringing a life into this world, and how they're going to do that. And so we have the real opportunity to support pregnant women. We have the real opportunity to step up and to support pregnancy centers. We have the real opportunity to address adoption laws and to make sure that it's easier for people to adopt and that it's not expensive. In other words, we have the true opportunity to be pro-life. Being pro-life doesn't just stop with the ending of abortion. Being pro-life means that we advocate for a quality of life, that we advocate for people to live and to live up to their full potential as God made them. Being pro-life means that we care for the whole person. Being pro-life means that we care for individuals, and we care not just for babies, but we care for adults as well, and to help each other out when we encounter difficult times. Hope this was a help to you and educational, if anything, entertaining. I encourage you to subscribe to the channel, like and share the video. Certainly would appreciate that. Hey, and thanks for tuning in. All right, take care.